Good afternoon. This is Damon Porter representing the Charleston Preservation Society's Oral History Project on July the 10th, 2022, and I am here with Ms. Sharon Scott. So, could you please tell us your address?
I live 1733 Jervey Avenue, Charleston.
Very good. When and where were you born?
I was born in Charleston on March 17, 1956.
Okay, so can you tell us what family business do you represent for this oral history interview?
My dad ran Scotty's Sweet Shop right down the street here, Fishburne and President Streets. He was strategically located where Rec School is, where Burke School, on the corner of Rec School, Burke School, Harmon Fields, and his store. And any black Charlestonian of a certain age who's over 65, 70 years old remembers fondly Scotty's Sweet Shop. That's where you went for the links and these red sausages that you put on the grill and you want them burnt and you put mustard on them and that was your after school treat. And he was also known for snowballs and candy apples and things like that. But that was the school hangout.
Very good. Sort of like the malt shop in the movies, right?
Right, but he didn't do malts, I don't think.
All right, very good. So let's start by talking about your upbringing in Charleston. Could you describe the neighborhood and house where you grew up?
Grew up, what they call back the green. We had our own house. On Norman Street. It doesn't exist anymore. It belonged to my maternal. I know that my great-grandmother lived there, and my grandmother, and then my mother. My mother was born in that house in 1915. And so we lived there until about 1973, I believe. We moved on up, I guess you could say, and the church across the street, Morning Star Baptist Church, purchased the property, and they demolished the house.
So the house doesn't exist anymore, or the street doesn't exist anymore, or both?
The house doesn't exist anymore.
But Mormon Street is still there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, very good. So can you tell us a little bit about the neighborhood in general?
Well, we had the Gadsden Green project, and then there was a strip between Bogard Street to Spring Street was Norman Street at that time. And I remember the Capers family lived at the corner of Norman and Bogard, then the Washington family, then the Scott family, then the Martin family, number 18, and then 16 when I was growing up was a tenement house. And I was just told never to go there. I don't know, but that was replaced by a 4-unit apartment building. And then there were 2 cottages next to that, Mr. Porcher and Miss Maybelle, and then another house there's several other houses, but what I'm saying is we knew everybody on that block.
Good.
Growing up.
Okay. So where did you go to school?
Well, I started out at Calvary Episcopal Church Day School. I was there for first grade. I didn't go to kindergarten. Then went to A.B. Rett School. Then Burke High School, where I graduated in 1973. And after that, I went to Tuskegee, what was called Tuskegee Institute, the other HBCU, and graduated there in 1977, went to graduate school at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and stopped there at the master's level.
Okay, what was your master's in?
Journalism.
Oh, I see.
I was an English major as an undergrad.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about Burke and Tuskegee in those days?
Well, Burke School was, I think, at that time, we were in the middle of the turmoil of the late 60s and early 70s, we protested a lot down there because I remember that we walked out to protest conditions at the school. The cafeteria was just horrible, and I don't even know what kind of health department grades they got there, but yeah, nobody wanted to eat there, and we demanded something better for us there, and staged a walkout. I guess this was my junior year. So there was
1972, right?
yes,
Right, I remember reading about that.
yeah, and all of that, and we were sort of also involved in the hospital strike in some way. We because I remember the National Guard was on the roof at Burke School, and we would be there taunting the National Guard. That was our way of protesting as well.
So the march to improve the conditions of the school, was that successful? Did you go to the school board or what?
Yes, the leaders of that movement, did go before the school board, and I read clippings of it and how they described the conditions and what the demands were. And the results weren't immediate, but something was done later on. And that cafeteria, so much of that old campus no longer stands there. So change did happen.
Well, that's good to know. So tell us a little bit about Tuskegee at the time.
A little bit of that was boiling up too, because we had students from all over the world, and I think the students who came from urban areas and northern cities were more vocal than we who were from the deep south. Mm-hmm. And there seemed to always be some protest about some program or something pretty often, but that didn't, it was just mainly, as I recall, not a lot of change happening or anything really substantive. But we made our grievances known. And but for me, I was like a fish out of water anyway, because here I am, this literary person who's at this school that emphasized a lot of science, and really one of the early adapters to STEM education. And if you weren't an engineer, or if you weren't in the life sciences, architecture, or nursing, the question I got a lot was, what are you doing here? And I didn't know the answer to that myself. But what was fascinating about it is a lot of my professors were around during the Harlem Renaissance. I had one English professor who hung out with Langston Hughes and County Cullen, and just to hear her stories. And there were some twins who were also on the faculty there. Her names, one was Ima Qualls and Ura Qualls. And I remember I had, and they were from, I'd never heard of Black people living in Maine. And let's see, which one? Ura was one of my professors, and she had that New England accent, and it was just really fascinating to me. And I remember she ripped one of my essays to shreds, but she helped me become a better writer. And she was one of those people who were part of the Harlem Renaissance, and that was just so exciting to me to be able to be one step removed, I guess you could say, from Langston Hughes. Yes,
they did visit that campus a lot in the 20s, so that's interesting. So let's talk a little bit more about your experiences growing up in Charleston and what that was like.
Okay, well, I was the last of 7 children, and we were poor, but didn't know it. But I had everything I needed, just about, and knew better than to ask for anything, because I knew we just didn't have it. Um, but I felt very loved and very protected there, especially with 5 big brothers, you know. And would go to the store, you know, stop by Scotty's sweet shop for after school, and my father would always give me a candy apple. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted something else, but I knew better than to say anything about it. And especially when he would bring home, all these memories were around food. And he used to bring home, you know, back in the day, you used to go get the 2 for a penny cookies out of the little box. And you'd serve yourself in that. And at the end of the day, or when a container was empty, there'd be a lot of crumbs in there. And he would bring those home for us to eat. But I don't remember really wanting for anything or, you know, being deprived. And we didn't have a lot of money. And my father got pancreatic cancer and died when I was 9 years old. And so, you know, that made things. My mother was a homemaker. She did not work outside of the home. And had to end up, well, she ended up working for a family downtown. You know, back in the day, you know, black women were the ones who would be out there cleaning the houses and polishing the brass street numbers on out front and that sort of thing. So she did that. She worked for a doctor and his wife, who was a social worker. And that woman really helped me decide to go beyond high school and go on to college. Even though I was not very focused. I had a strong musical aptitude and I sang, but I didn't play an instrument, didn't have the discipline to learn to play an instrument. But anyhow, that's how I got on the Tuskegee Choir. At least I could do that. But she helped me with writing essays for admission, or at least even just filling out applications and things. And she, you know, again, it was one of these between her and my mother. And my mother may describe it as one way, and this woman would describe it as another. She felt she was a friend or part of my mother was a part of her family, and you know, the dynamics are not quite the same.
I understand what you mean.
But she and I got in touch with each other many years later when I moved back to Charleston, and you know, she kind of like watched how she knew my brother, the brother next to me and my sister, how we grew up and succeeded and moved on to careers and the like. And so yeah, we may not have had a lot of money, but I think we had values that helped us move beyond our beginnings. And I'm really grateful for that.
Very interesting. So where else have you lived? You said you lived after Tuskegee, you went to Chicago?
Champaign, Illinois.
I'm sorry.
It's a whole different place in Chicago.
I'm sorry.
So that was the first place I got called the N-word, in Champaign,
Really?
Illinois. That's right. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
And so anyway.
Well, how did that, okay, so you didn't have that well, I guess since, growing up in a predominantly black community here
Right.
and then going to a black school, that would make sense.
Right.
Okay.
And so anyway, so I was at graduate school there in the School of Journalism. And I had a lot of black friends. We tend to we found each other because there was my first week there. I had no money. I had no way of getting anything to eat. I had a stipend waiting for me, but I had to register first. But I couldn't register till I got the stipend. So I was in this catch-22 over a weekend. And one person, but I must say, it was a white guy who helped me, who bought me lunch one day, and I'm ever grateful for that. And then I found a group of black kids who took me out for pizza and soda, and and we became friends and hung around that whole time. So I found my little tribe in on that vast campus, and managed to survive that. And other people who were within the journalism program that we became friends with in there.
Okay, so with this journalism background, what is your occupation today?
I'm a retired editor. I first worked in Lexington, North Carolina, and then moved to Wilmington, North Carolina. Worked for the paper there. Then went to Charlotte, and I was an assistant news editor for the paper there. And
The Observer?
yes, The Observer. Then I moved to the Washington Post and stayed there for 23 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how are your experiences in those cities?
I enjoyed my stay in Lexington. I was there for 5 years. A lot of us I was the only Black person, I think, in the newsroom, but the rest of us were fresh out of school. All of us were fresh out of school. And, there wasn't a heck of a lot to do there. But a lot of people didn't know what to make of me. Here's this Black woman who went to college. She doesn't have a passel of kids, and who is this woman? So I had to deal with a lot of that. And I got razzed a lot. The Black community didn't know what to make of me. And then I would write something about a Black person, and white people would say, why is she doing this? Yes, I got some of that. And when I became the editor of a section of that paper, my boss got calls from white people, and why is she the editor of the family section? She doesn't have children. She's not married. But they didn't say, but she's Black. But because I had many confrontations with people where, all right, it was my job. I turned them down for something. They'd go to a white person. And one day I just blew up in the newsroom and said, well, why they went to you instead of me, your boss. And so I had to do a lot of that. But I found it as a learning experience. It helped me become more assertive as I went up in my career. And so that gave me backbone.
What about Charlotte and D.C.?
Charlotte how long was I there? For maybe 3 years. I wasn't particularly happy, but that was a personal thing more than that career-wise. And I worked behind the scenes, so nobody outside of the paper knew what it was that I did. Anyway, but it was my job on the weekends, the Sunday paper, it was my job in consultation with other editors, what would go on the front page. And I would lay that out and say, well, this is the main story, and and so on. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed making those decisions and being in charge of that, even if it was for maybe 1 or 2 days a week. I think it was the weekends that I did that. And just didn't like, of course, that's the nature of the beast working in newspapers, is that you work at night so that you get your paper in the morning. And so there are those of us who were toiling 1 o'clock in the morning to make sure that the paper gets out there, be on your doorstep in time for your Cheerios and coffee in the morning.
Okay. And D.C.?
D.C. was wonderful. It was just amazing to be right in the middle of things without actually being in the middle of things. And during that time, it was the end of the Reagan administration. And so I was there for the fall of the Berlin Wall, for the arrest of Marion Barry, for Lorena Bobbitt, and I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, very much so. I'm of that age.
And what other things? But again, it was my job to, I started out as a copy editor in the Metro section. So I dealt with mainly local news and getting a story, preparing a story for publication and writing the headlines. And So, yeah, again, it was a job that you did. You went to work at 4:30 in the afternoon. You got off work maybe midnight or 2 a.m., depending on what it is you had to do. And yeah, and I was also there in the middle of all the crack wars. And I lived on a street where I just needed somebody to do something for me. And I realized I'm walking the corner. I said, oh, they're probably not doing very nice things. But they were very respectful. And I said, well, I couldn't ask somebody to come help me move this couch. It's nothing like that. But anyhow, but working at the paper, I think, was really great, where I was able to do a little of everything. And we had our little black group over here, and there were people that we supported each other, especially the women. And that was very important, where we talked to each other and gave each other advice. And it got to, at the time of my early retirement, I was the editor of the National Weekly edition of the Post. This before there was the internet. People who lived outside of Washington didn't get the entire paper, would get a digest of the news in a tabloid and mailed it to them. And so I had my little office there with my name on the door, and black reporters would come in and just sit down and just talk to me. And I would do my best to listen to them vent. And so it was more than just putting out a paper every week. It was like, that was, I was like, their therapist,
Okay. So tell us about your family background and your parents and where they grew up.
Both my parents are from Charleston. Both of them also, ancestors were somewhere in the Strawberry, South Carolina, Berkeley County.
By Monk's Corner.
By Monk's Corner, yes. And because there's also an area called Scotts Hill down there, so a lot of my third and fourth cousins live down there. And my mother's family is from Monk's Corner as well, but both of them were born in Charleston. My mother was, she was a Gilliard, and then my maternal grandmother married a McCants, so they were all known, and she had like 7 or 8 other children, and so they were all known as the McCants family. My father had about 9 brothers and sisters as well, and some lived in the Charleston area, and a few went to New York, and a couple were in the military, so they lived everywhere.
Okay. So tell us about your father, Mr. Albert Scott, and how he got started in the business.
As I recall, since I'm the youngest of 7, and only 2 of us survive right now, I knew he worked at the Navy Yard. He was an electrician at the Navy Yard, and then he decided to go into business for himself. And at first he opened Scotty's, it was called Scotty's Sweet Shop at the corner of Cumming and Cannon Street. This was in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s, I believe it is. And it was a sandwich shop. And he employed a couple of my aunts, and they would work there too. And he had that for several years. I don't know how many years. And then he opened Scotty's. That was probably in the late 50s. And decided to sell candy and snacks and sandwiches and things like that in his store on Fishburne Street.
Okay, so there was basically a first and a second Scotty Sweet Shop.
Yes.
All right, now what about this Loretta's Kitchen?
Oh, Lorette's is what it was called. That was a short-lived restaurant at the corner of Ashley Avenue and Sumter Street. There was a safety cab stand that was on the opposite corner, and what used to be Calvary Baptist Church, the original Calvary Baptist Church on one corner, and then the other corner was a house. And I understand he was aiming for a tablecloth restaurant, white tablecloth restaurant, on the lines of what the Ladson House was. And that didn't last very long because there was, before there were liquor laws keeping children out of such establishments. And when teachers kept their private business private, there was the mixing of the young kids and the teachers in there when, and alcohol was being served. And so that didn't sit well with the adults. And so things started. It just didn't last very long. Maybe a couple of years.
So do you remember exactly about when was this?
Let's see. In the early '60s, about 1963 to '64, I believe. Yes.
So the Scotty Sweet Shop now, the main one that is, the longer lasting one, that was primarily the students of Burke High and Rent Junior High School and where else?
Or kids coming off the playground at Harmon Field.
So it was primarily for children.
I wouldn't say for children, but during the 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah,
the main clientele was young people.
Yeah.
But the adults also would go there to get things too?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you said this opened about when?
I know it closed in about 1964 because he got sick. And when it began, maybe 1960. I just don't know for sure. And so that's one of the things I needed to check and find out about.
Now, can you tell me the names of some of the other key players in these businesses?
Well, Mr. Ladson, the Ladson House, that had a restaurant on President and Kennedy Streets, and that was, that was a white tablecloth restaurant where you would, and he also had a takeout area as well where you'd go and order takeout food, and but that's where a lot of civic meetings were held. Family reunions, church banquets, and that that's just up the street down the street from Scotty's.
Okay.
Down there.
But so he was primarily running these businesses by himself?
Yes. Well, Scotty's, it was a one-man operation. He had help from a couple other people, and then. And my sister-in-law, when she got married one of my brothers. She would help out. Yeah.
Okay, so after he passed, you said he gave it up when he got sick.
Yes.
1964. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So your father's businesses, they were active mostly on Charleston's west side.
Yes.
All right, what we now know as Canberra, L.A. Borough, and so forth. Can you tell us about life in those neighborhoods in those days?
Again, it was where everyone knew everybody, and the people who lived on the project were respectable folks, and you'd go and I played with the kids, and I knew we'd go trick or treat. That was the best place to go trick or treating because the density of the housing, and so. We would do that. And I knew people up and down the street. I played with all these kids. I knew their parents knew my parents, and just very close-knit, right in that little area. We didn't venture too much beyond that. And it was a low-lying area because I think it was built on a potter's field down there. So when it rained, it flooded, and as kids, we would just go wading in that stuff, not having any idea of what could possibly be in that water. But that was our recreation. We were happy to get, to be able to do that. We didn't go to the beach. We couldn't go to Folly Beach, and so that's what we did.
So did you take toy boats out there when it flooded?
I did.
Or build little boats like things? Because that's what we did where I lived.
I don't think we did. I don't recall that. We would just wade around in that water, and who knows what runoff was in there.
Okay.
And yeah.
So how would you describe the changes in those neighborhoods over time, especially with the crosstown and things like that?
Oh, the crosstown was devastating because the neighbors that I had in that swath, they all had to move, and trying to get, let's say, to Spring and President Street, you took your life in your hands just trying to get over there. And
With the crosstown.
With the crosstown, yes. And that was the beginning of the end of that neighborhood, I think. And so it was just the people that you knew. I can remember some of the families that used to live there or what was standing there, and it's all gone now.
So do you know if they would rightfully compensate people for moving who had to move in those days?
Oh no, I don't think. I don't even know if it was eminent domain where they could just come and take it. I don't know whether people got any type of compensation for having to leave their homes.
So how did the crosstown affect the businesses?
A lot of businesses were gone. There used to be a butcher at the corner of President and Spring Street, Max's. It was a Jewish man who ran this.
Was this Carl Harley?
No, not Carl Harley, but I think Carl Harley was affected by that too, because on that corner there was a Carrick's seafood shop on one corner, Kennedy's drugstore, and the diagonal from Kennedy's was Carl Harley.
Right, because Aunt Pauline used to send me there on errands to get her meats, and she lived on Spring Street.
We'd go there and get the meats, and there was a Piggly Wiggly up there on Spring Street,
excuse me, Carl Harley Butcher Shop, to clarify for people who read this.
And there was a Piggly Wiggly and a 5 and dime store, Crown 5 and Dime. It was on the northwest end of Spring Street, just before you got over the bridge. And there used to be a black hotel up there too, the St. James Hotel.
St. James, yes, where McDonald's is today.
Yes, that's right.
Now, if my memory serves correctly, because I was a little boy with all of this, wasn't there the A&P grocery store somewhere around there during this time?
Oh, where was A&P? I don't remember it was A&P. Why do I want to think it was on Grove Street? That's what I'm thinking, but I'm probably wrong on that. I can't remember where that A&P was.
Okay.
But it was a Piggly Wiggly.
Okay. So after Mr. Scott passed, what happened to the businesses?
That building was vacant for years, and there might be some other small business, a candy shop that would try to duplicate what he did, but no one ever succeeded for any amount of time.
Okay. So were there other business owners in your family?
No. Were there other?
Yes.
Say were? Yeah, my uncle Edwin Scott ran a upholstery shop.
What?
Upholstery.
Okay.
Veterans upholstery. And where did that begin? I don't remember, but I knew he had one shop on Ashley Avenue and Race Street. That building's vacant now. And diagonal from that was Tommy's grocery store. Tommy White. There are condos there now. And Mr. Goodwin lived across the street, and I think him and his family members still live there. And I can't remember who lived on the corner. But my uncle I did upholstery and refinished furniture, and then he moved to Folly Road before he passed.
And how old were you when he passed?
Oh, maybe this is the early '90s that he
Okay.
passed out.
So, do you have a favorite memory of visiting your father's businesses?
Going there after school, fighting my way through the crowd, and he would see me and just hand me a candy apple, which was not what I wanted. But like I said, I can't look a gift horse in the mouth. And he made the best candy apples. They would not melt in the Charleston humidity.
That says a lot.
Yes, and his recipe died with him. We do not have the recipe. He just had the right touch where it wasn't too brittle and it wasn't too what's the word I want, soggy, and it didn't melt off in the heat. He really didn't make them during this time of year, but if there was a warm autumn, and other candy apples would just melt. And
I don't even think children eat candy apples anymore.
at the fair, maybe.
Now,
Yeah.
So how do you think that that your father would want his legacy to be remembered?
That he was a man who fought for civil rights. He was part of the civil rights movement
How
as
so?
well. He was in the NAACP, and there was this boycott in the early '60s of downtown, and they
Yes,
had these orange
condoms.
flyers saying,
The
"Don't
blacklist.
shop where the blacklist, right?
Don't shop
Don't
where
you can't work." Yes. So he was involved in that, and that's the most vivid memory I have of that. And he was a very generous man. He didn't have much, but he was a generous man. And even one of my classmates told me that he paid for her school books.
Really?
And and he was very active in his church, Wesley United Methodist Church on Meeting Street. And he was active in the PTA at Rhett School. And he was always learning things. I remember when the new math came out, he and my mother went to classes at night to learn how to deal with this math so they could help me with my homework. And so he was a very good, generous, God-fearing man.
Do you know the extent of his education?
High school, and I think back then you only went as far as the 11th grade.
Right, till 1948.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, he was largely self-educated and wanted to. Okay, very good. Now, let's see. So, what do you hope for the future of Charleston?
I want young people to understand the past, what this was like in the past, and that it's not a lost cause. But they've got to take up the mantle. I really think we boomers dropped the ball. And so we have to let the generation after us and the generation after that really to come back. That's why I was really so proud of what was happening during the George Floyd incident, that people woke up and said, we've got to do something about this. And we are doing something about it. And instead of just saying, oh, isn't that terrible? Somebody has to do something. And there are people who are actually